Artificial intelligence and robotic systems have taken drug discovery way beyond Fred and the test tube. I'm Tonya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Peter Harris. He is the CEO of HighRes Biosolutions. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks for having me.
So what does HighRes Biosolutions do?
We are designers and producers of complex robotic systems that are used principally, although not exclusively, in biopharmaceutical research. So we build, large complex integrations with 1 to 6 or 7 robots that are used in the discovery process for people who are searching for new therapies to treat human health conditions.
Tell us about the combination of man and machine in drug discovery. What about this combination is revolutionary?
Well, the drug discovery world has a bunch of characteristics that are super favorable for robotics and automation. It's an industry in which the cost of discovering each new therapy has been increasing over the years, and the large pharmaceutical companies and startups are all working diligently to control these costs. Some of the cost comes in the form of, by the time you get to discovering a drug that works, there are a whole bunch of drugs that you worked on that didn't work. So the one that works ends up carrying all the cost of the failures. So anything that can be done to reduce the ongoing cost of experimentation and sort of take the unknown or sort of uncontrolled elements out of it, increase the overall quality and control of that process, are cost positive pieces. And as a result, today robots really aren't as good as people in a ton of different ways. Robots are remarkably simple, basic machines that cannot compete with humans on a ton of fronts. But what they do really well is they're relentless. They never stop. They don't sort of pause to ask Susie how her weekend was. And they're able to parallel process many more things. Because if I ask you, for example, to, even in your kitchen, say, keep track of how long something is in the toaster, remember how long something has been soaking, how long has something been on the stove, and where is the rice cooker in its sort of cycle, it's pretty difficult for you to keep track of more than 2 things at once. But a robotic system can track all those things simultaneously, almost for practical purposes to an infinite number. So the human and robot combination is perfect in the sense that you can have the robot do what it does really well and let the human do what it does really well, as long as those two can work together safely in the same environment. And in that context, you get a system of human and robot together that is far more productive than either would be without the other.
What is the range of tasks that the robots are completing?
So if we, I would just make the small distinction between the robot and the robotic system as 2 different animals. The robot is just a piece of a bigger system. Robots fundamentally are movers, right? So the robot is going to move things through the system. And the overarching software, and people these days use the term robot in many times when they should just say software. If we say robots are taking jobs, software is taking a lot of jobs. Robots are actually taking very few jobs today. But the robot will move the individual, in our case, microplates, which is a carrying unit for experimental material. It will move the microplates through the system through various stages, passing it from machine to machine, each of which does a separate function along the sort of process of discovery. But overall, the system is going to run a range of experimental research tasks that, if I were to grossly oversimplify it, you can think of the process of experimenting to find a new drug, at least for screening, as we need to, we have a target that we're trying to find in the body, see what it does. We think this target in the body has something to do with a disease state. And then we have a giant library of stuff that we've got. And what we want to know is which things in our library actually affect the target. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring stuff from our library over to the system. We're going to do a bunch of steps from heating and cooling to mixing it in liquid, et cetera, to cook it in one form or another, process it. And then at the end, we're going to put it in front of a reader and say, did anything happen? So our systems basically cycle stuff through all of those steps so that you go from starting with a bunch of compounds to a bunch of data at the end of it that say what happened in that process.
How does artificial intelligence help in the drug discovery process?
Yeah, so artificial intelligence or people are working on artificial intelligence for drug discovery on a variety of levels. But I think the most currently promising area that it's helping is in the actual reading and processing of the results, because experimentation in drug discovery is super data intensive. We create lots of data. Then the data needs to be analyzed, right? Creating the data is one thing, but in order for data to become information, it needs analysis. And there are a lot of people doing very interesting things where, you capture, say, an image of, 3D cell image at the end of a process. And you can have a person sit back and look at it, but if you can build a machine learning driven, AI process that is actually able to look at these images over and over again and tell you this one's interesting and this one is not, then you actually have a really fascinating analytical engine at the end of it. And it's interesting because AI and robotics have this really symbiotic relationship where today, to be frank about it, there's very little I in AI. There's a lot of A, but much of AI is really like complex multivariable regression on steroids in an automated fashion. And it's very helpful and powerful, but it's not like it's super intelligent. So it needs a ton of data to be able to learn. The way you make AI smarter is by bombarding it with data. And in order to get that data, you actually need robotic systems to generate and capture it. So if you had an AI at the end of something, and then a bunch of humans with test tubes and beakers, you wouldn't create enough data to make the AI smart, and the AI would far outpace them. So with the robotic system to generate massive amounts of data and the AI to process it, you have this really awesome loop that's pretty promising in terms of what it can do for discovering new therapies.
Explain the concept of modularity in robot design and why it matters.
Yeah. So in order to explain that, I will start by just saying you have to understand the difference between industrial robots and collaborative robots. Until reasonably recently, all robots were industrial robots. They're dumb, they're powerful, they're repetitive, and they don't care if you're standing in the way. So if you walk into the field of motion of an industrial robot, it will weld you. It will knock you out of the way to keep going. This is why, across all industries, almost all automation until pretty recently has been some miniaturized version of an automotive assembly line in which there's a monolithic, static installation that is really only suited for very high volume applications, because the robot might cost $50,000, $75,000, but the tooling around it that guards it and causes things to be in the right place could be $1 million. So you can't very easily, if you're building sedans on your line, you can't just tomorrow say, I want to build hatchbacks. That doesn't work. That's a giant retooling exercise, principally because of all the guarding and tooling that are around the robots. So when you enter with collaborative robots, which have sensing abilities and sort of torque controls that allow you to safely interact with them, where you can just reach out and stop the robot and the human and the robot can coexist, now you open up the elimination of all guarding on systems, the ability to put a robot on a cart or even on a mobile base. All of the innovation you're seeing in warehouse robotics right now of these systems moving around are dependent on those being collaborative robots. So as a result, we take the view in our architecture that it's really important to design your systems with docks and carts, mobility and collaboration, so that if today you're doing an experiment that requires one kind of reader, and tomorrow, instead of measuring fluorescence, you want to take 3D cell images, you can just pull that card out and put in the new reader and off you go. And it needs to be plug and play, so it doesn't require an automation engineer to come in and reconfigure your system. We want our systems to sort of adapt to our users' science as opposed to making their science adapt to the system. And a key element of that is letting them reconfigure it at will, or letting them say, take part of the system off, pull it into their office and use it for something else, and then bring it back to the system and put it back on differently. So that's how modularity affects how we approach system design.
Is it possible to create more personalized healthcare delivery through automation?
I would say that personalized medicine, so to speak, has an interesting relationship, if not dependency, on robotics and automation in certain cases. So, you know, personalized medicine can mean all kinds of different things, but in one example, you know, in immunotherapy, for example, where say to fight cancer, what we want to do is we're going to take your T cells out of your body that don't recognize the type of cancer that's in your body. And then we're going to adjust them in one form or another, teach them how to recognize that cancer, and then put them back into your body. You know, it's possible to do that without robotics and automation, but if you just think about the controls required so that you're comfortable having your material pulled out and then your material pulled back in, I think most people like the idea that a system with perfect tracking and data capture is monitoring what's happening to their material, and it's not Fred with a test tube adjusting your stuff where maybe you got it right or maybe you didn't get it just exactly right, but we're going to stick it right back into you and hope it works. So if we use the case where personalized medicine actually involves really developing stuff that is tailored for you from a regulatory standpoint, from a control standpoint, I think you like robotics and automation as part of that engine more than you don't.
What milestones do you hope to achieve in the near future?
Well, we just launched what is, I think, our probably most disruptive product that we've ever developed, which is a sort of automated liquid handler that is pretty substantially different than all of the other automated liquid handlers on the market. Without getting into great detail, I would just say lab space is incredibly valuable. So taking up horizontal lab space is expensive. And remarkably, the other liquid handling companies out there have solved large capacity by creating very large liquid handlers. We sort of turned that on its head from a design perspective and built a vertically oriented one. So it's in a very small form, but it's got very high throughput. I think, much of our near-term agenda is pushing the adoption and penetration of that liquid handler while continuing to sort of advance the areas in which automation has penetrated into biopharmaceutical research. So there are a lot of areas that have been automated for a long time, and there are a lot of areas that have not been automated at all. The sort of advent and development of collaborative robotics and mobile robotics are opening up doors that haven't existed. And part of our mission is to really continue to pioneer that for our customers.
Well, we thank you, Peter, for pioneering that space. Peter Harris, CEO at HighRes Biosolutions. If somebody wants to connect with you, maybe they want to find out more about your work in robotics, how can they do that?
So the easiest way to find out more about us is to go to our website, highresbio.com. If you want to connect with me personally, I'm pretty active on Twitter. My handle's 2PeterHarris @2 Peter Harris.
Thanks again, Peter. And if you guys want to find more of my interviews, you can. I'm right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or maybe find me by going to my website, tonyahall.net. I have links to all my social sites, including my Twitter, which is @Tonya Hall Radio. I hope to hear from you, and thanks for watching.